What's up, guys? Welcome everyone for tuning into what do we decide to call this? The Cash Podcast.
We're working on it. It's the CashPod. Uh, you know, ideas are welcome. I think we can still
The
figure it
balance
out little
sheet.
by little.
Well, anyways, the purpose of this podcast is really for us to get into all things growth, cash, money, and yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the elements of how you finance your business, how you grow your business, how you manage your finances, how you think about securing the bag and what that means, and then also talk a little bit about and hopefully bring on some potential potential businesses sometime soon. Talk a little bit more about their journey. But I think it's probably worth doing some introductions. I'm gonna throw it to Ignacio.
I'm Ignacio, one of the co-founders at Bags. I look after all things product related, so what we're building at Bags behind the scenes to make hopefully everyone's life a little bit easier, a little bit more magical, even when it comes to things like accounting that are usually boring and not magical at all. Um, yeah, my background's in fintech, born and raised in Ecuador. Have known, I think, DT for well over a decade now, and William less, but it feels like the same at this point. I think on a call yesterday, I said sometimes I feel like I'm married to William, which I think goes to show a little bit of where we're at as a team. Yeah, on that note, William,
Wow. I'm not sure I can beat that. I am William, Ignacio's spouse. At times, and I lead up our customer facing operations overall, which includes both helping people with their financial management, accounting, bookkeeping services that are really critical to business operations, and then also access to capital solutions that we build, which are also in a lot of ways just as critical when we're talking about the growth and the opportunities that a business might have. So that is where I principally sit with an awesome team, and I got here from building internal agencies at a Fortune 100 media company. Was in consulting at one point, and really have bounced around throughout my career, picking up insights. And the insight that drives me every day is that 60% of people are actively disengaged in the work that they do every day, and I would like to see what the world looks like if more people are happy about what they're doing. And I think entrepreneurship is probably the way to get there. Daniel, back to you.
And to be clear, William is an English major, and when I say this man knows more about funding and financing the growth of your business than I think anyone on earth, is pretty pretty unbelievable.
High
Um,
praise. I'm certainly the person who knows the most about that as well as the Shakespearean histories. So like,
Okay, so now when we say pause, because he will start reciting Shakespeare, and no one really wants that. Um, Maybe some people do, but not us, not on the podcast, Cash Posh pod.
cash posh.
Fake Cash pod. What's going on? I am DT, CEO and co-founder of Bags. I spend most of my time working with these two very, very closely to make sure everyone is aligned. But then I also spend my time on all things fundraising, sales, marketing, chatting with incredible businesses to understand how we can, better serve them and solve their problems. And yeah, started this company 4 years ago, with 4.5 years ago with these guys. Prior to that, I sold an advertising tech business, which at some point we can throw in what it means to get acquired on a pod. But yeah, we all got together with the core mission that if our goal really is to increase access to entrepreneurship, and we want to do so through increasing access to capital. And in order to solve access to capital, we have to build a better way for businesses to manage their finances, practice financial efficiency, which we can talk about at some point. but then really learn and understand how to leverage their own cash, but leverage external financing for the purposes of business growth. And if we can do so, we can create good jobs, allow businesses to generate wealth for themselves, and then really help stabilize and reinvest in local economies. But today, the topic of conversation, which is typically the one that I feel like we start with when talking to most business owners, because um, it's I feel like it's the thing that has the biggest mic in the room, but not necessarily the thing that's always best for businesses, is um, how to think about the difference between raising debt to fund the growth of your business or being venture backed or raising equity and the intricacies of that. Um, but I think it's probably worth starting out with the foundational elements of like, well, can you give us just an understanding of the difference between like equity and debt on like a basic level, and then we can talk a little bit about like venture and some of the other things.
100%. Yeah, I think debt is scary. Of course it is with everything that's going on. When you're thinking about debt to finance the business, it's also not like a totally vague box that you're playing in. Debt to grow your business means that you're taking existing financial metrics, and those metrics are convincing somebody, a loan underwriter, to give you a sum of money to advance your business with the expectation that you'll pay that back plus interest. Ideally, not a super expensive interest rate. Now, the things that are flexible are the term, so how long you can keep the money before you pay it back, how repayments are structured, whether it is a fixed interest-only payment, interest plus some of the principal, if it's revenue-based financing, merchant cash advances are just going to eat your lunch and destroy your life. There's all sorts of different structures there. Variable is the interest rate. So how much you have to pay back. Some people charge an interest rate, which accrues over time based on your outstanding balance. Other people are giving you a fixed fee up front. Some people are doing a monthly. Some people are doing an annualized. And there's just a lot out there. That is a sort of a picture of debt. At the same time, there's different products that can be used for different things. So you might have a basic loan. You might also have a loan product that's just for the purpose of advancing you money on invoices that you've sent to your customers. So say you send a major retailer an invoice for $80,000. Someone will give you $75,000 right now, and then they'll give you the remainder minus whatever fee they're charging when the retailer ultimately pays, sometimes net 30, sometimes net 60. Equity, on the other hand, is like totally a vague thing that can happen in any structure. But typically investors are coming to the table with specific desires. One thing that I see founders miss all the time is they're just like, oh, I'm going to go raise a round. And they go and call some investors and they say, hey, like I'm trying to raise $1 million. I'm going to give myself, maybe a $20 million valuation. I don't have that much revenue right now, but like that's the amount I need and that's how much I'm willing to give up. And I'm just hoping that investors will say yes. The great thing about equity is there really is no practical obligation to return the cash. And there's no explicit timeline in many cases. Sometimes there's, depending on the format, a conversion event. We don't have to get into that. But you typically it's like, oh yeah, I like get this money. I don't have to pay it back. I spend it how I want. I grow my business. It's important to think about some things that investors keep in mind, which is typically they want to get their money back times 100 or so minimum within 7 years. And so similar to a loan, like there is an expectation of repayment. Now there's less penalty if you don't do that, but it's going to be way more expensive when you do. And similarly, most investors have a target ownership percentage. So if you're running out to the market and you're saying, hey, I'm going to raise this amount at this valuation, and the amount you're raising doesn't match up with the ownership percentage, think about like someone wants to be buying 10% of your company. Many investors are going to bow out, especially VCs. So I just went on a long rant, but those are like the two different categories and things to look out for. I could go for like 2 more hours, so I'll stop in case there's something else to talk about.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we always start with as a business is, and that we try to encourage people to think about before thinking about where they get their money is like, what's the type of business that you want to build, right? Do you want to build that, multi-billion dollar business? Do you want to build something that generates cash flow and is sustainable for you and your customers? And I think the reality is starting there will better enable businesses to decide where they want to go. But Ignacio, do you want to talk a little bit about what we are seeing from a customer and from a business perspective around um, uh, how the majority of businesses are funding their growth? Is it more debt? Is it more equity? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I think what's cool about our customer base is that the majority of businesses are looking at debt as the primary option, and I think that says a lot about, to your point, just like the underlying health of the value proposition of the business, which is super cool. It's like you've proven that something has value already. You've commercialized that value in the market. Someone's paying you for what you're doing or what you're selling. And then you're using those proof points to go out and get money to just do that more and quicker and at a higher volume. And it just creates, I think, more sustainable businesses. And of course, I think, like some of the bags customers we work with actually do both, right? Because they see an even higher opportunity to accelerate their business and go into that 5, 10, 25, 100x multiple game, which is of course higher risk, but also higher reward. And what I find really encouraging is that they are also using debt so that the equity goes to the right places to get that growth from like 1x or 2x year on year into the 5x's that you try to see in venture. And I think that's quite cool. But yeah, back to your point, almost everyone's looking at debt. And I think what's been really interesting about our user base is that not everyone wanted to look at debt when they just came in.
For sure.
Yeah, I think like to William's point, like it was scary, or some folks come in with personal debt from student loans, or some folks have like a massive debt on their house, and it's just like it's this thing of how am I going to pay this back? It's just going to sink my business, and obviously, to be clear, it can. But more than anything, I think if we find, we talk about product market fit a lot on the product side and the tech side, and it's like if we find debt to problem or debt to business fit, it's actually a really useful tool. And I think it takes away the element of scary because you're paying a short-term price as opposed to that long-term cost with equity. Yeah, so sorry I bounced around a little bit there, but I think we can all get pretty excited about just like look at it holistically on both sides.
Yeah. And Will, circling back to you, and I know you touched on this briefly, but like say I'm a business and I have both options, right? Someone's willing to give me equity dollars, and I've also got some debt options as well. Like, what should businesses be using each for? Given, let's say you've got access to both, like what should I be putting my equity dollars for versus what should I be putting my debt dollars to work for? And then obviously I know there are different types of debt, but like generally, like what do you typically see businesses using those dollars for
Yeah, I mean,
that are
I think
doing so in a sustainable way?
there's a difference between typically seeing and like what the actual answer is. I think that, I was talking to a friend who has been working in small business financing for a long time, and the number one problem that she flagged was people who end up getting money don't know what to do with it. So happy to answer this question. I think the answer is very simple. If you have a blend of equity and debt, which I think is a great position for a business to be in, when you're spending money on something that won't translate to revenue, or at least won't translate to revenue anytime soon, use equity because you don't have to pay it back as fast. But if what you're investing in is going to turn into money, so you're buying inventory, you're spending on marketing that has, a sales target attached to it, anything that will yield more money, use debt because the cost of the capital will be covered by the margin you make on the sales. And then it's just the debt is just allowing you to scale up much faster because you have more available credit for cash outlays to recoup through revenue and the profitable business operating model.
That's it. If there's a way to use debt to unlock revenue, like I feel like we spend so much time just thinking about that. And I feel like that is once we sort of expose the opportunity there, that's the moment within businesses' mind where they go, wait a second, this actually makes a lot of sense. It's actually a conversation about revenue growth and debt being a pathway towards that revenue growth that we can really double down into. Right. But I
Yeah.
think with both, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, and I talk to lenders, I talk to investors all the time. And one thing that I always say that I see people start to get their heads nodding is that, and this is a hard thing for a lot of people to hear, is that one thing you should use neither of those for, debt or equity, really, is to hire people.
Not
And
even equity?
not even equity.
Oh, interesting.
Hiring
Why is that?
in an environment where cash is hard to get and expensive to get, hiring should be done through revenue, period. You should increase revenue until you have enough revenue to justify the cost of the hire. And a big part of that is because hiring is one of the most inconsistent areas of business operations. It's very common for a hire to not work out, and the money that you've paid that person is sort of just gone at that point. So really dangerous if it's debt money that paid for them because you got to pay it back plus interest. Also dangerous if it's equity because you made a cash outlay that won't manifest in something ever. And really, whenever you're using outsized capital, you want to make sure it's going to manifest in something positive, and you're really confident it's going to manifest in a positive cash position improvement for your business over time.
Yeah, that's and that's such a tough thing, right? Because as founders, right, like the first thing that we think about when we get some money in our pocket, we're like, we need a team. Let's go hire XYZ, right? Like, um, and I think we're at a point in time, and Ignacio, I'd love to sort of get your sense on the state of the market right now, but I think we're in a period of time where um, we're kind of seeing a shift in like the culture around how people grow their businesses, and I think we spent a lot of time and a lot of money has been spent and on it's kind of like the Shark Tank effect of like how to build this venture-backed business, but not as much time building a sustainable business. Um, and and so, Ignacio, from your perspective, like what's happening in venture right now that you're seeing, from a market trends perspective? Um, you know, what's like the environment a little bit like from a debt perspective right now? I know rates are higher, right? And I know you mentioned we're seeing more businesses being driven towards debt, but I think it's worth always touching on like what actually is happening on the equity side and potentially how that's kind of having an impact on the debt side. Oh, Higgs, you're on mute.
Classic. Yeah. That's I think it's a really good question to dive into, and I think it's part of the reason folks are moving to debt is just like
Mm,
equity is getting harder. Venture capital
mm,
is getting harder to access. And I think like where I would summarize at least my experience and our experience and the experience of founders that we've spoken to is just like it's not that there's less venture capital out there, is that it's just like more concentrated. So it's like a game of even more extremes than it was before, right?
yeah,
Like venture is, if there, where we see venture and equity investments being deployed is much more aggressively on fewer companies. And right now, AI is the hottest thing. So AI takes a huge pool of that. If you're not working in AI, or hardware on microchips or things along those lines, it gets really, really hard. Whereas like venture 5, 6 years ago, or even less, maybe 3 years ago, was a little bit more spread out, right? Like you would see it in CPG, you would see it in like kind of smaller SaaS products and smaller SaaS ideas. And now what I think the venture landscape is pointing at is like fewer winners that win a lot bigger.
yep,
And so, instead of thinking of your company or yourself as like the 1%, you have to think of yourself as a 0.01 or maybe 0.1%. And if you really think you're there in terms of performance, growth, opportunity, then venture is amazing for you because it can really skyrocket that growth and allow you to achieve that potential. But if you're not there, I think you're probably better off figuring out how to build a more sustainable cadence for the business. And I don't think that's really sacrificing high growth. You're just sacrificing exponentially high growth. I think last thing on the venture market there is that the complexity of due diligence and the complexity of,
Oh yeah.
yeah, we've seen it ourselves. It's just so much higher than it was, at least in my first few rounds of experience fundraising for different companies. I think there was a higher willingness to like take a bet on an idea or take a bet on a team for the sake of the idea or for the sake of the team before, especially in the early days. Now investors in the venture space are kind of seeing that kickback of, we've deployed a bunch of money and maybe it hasn't gone as well as we thought it would. So now they're going back to like the fundamentals and the basics and really looking at the business in the way that debt investors or even private equity or just banking in general will look at a business, right? Like, what are your margins? How are your numbers tracking? And I think balancing that, I guess to summarize it, before you could raise venture on the potential of an idea and just like, this is going to be the next Facebook or the next Airbnb. And I think there was a lot more inclination to believe that that could be possible. Now you have to raise venture on a much more complex kind of pitch, which is this can be the next Airbnb, but also these are the numbers to justify that it's a sustainable business in the short term.
And also AI.
And also AI, yeah. And those things just like they're at odds with each other because when you're trying to like shoot for the moon, you need to make a really big investment up front. And to like get the traction you need, do the testing you need to actually figure out how that's going to explode down the line. And building a business that sustains itself while you're doing that is sometimes they're contrary decisions. And investors kind of don't care. They're still asking for both. It's like, show me your path to profitability, show me your healthy business, and show me how you're going to be the next billion-dollar team or company in your industry. So yeah, it's a complex space, but I think the complexity also increases the opportunity for the winners. The folks that are getting funded are getting much more funding more aggressively than I think they had before.
Yeah. And quick comment on AI. I know that's the trigger word that a lot of people are thinking about, as you're thinking about growing your business. And, honestly, in the past, I've fallen for the trap of let me adjust my business for the purposes of raising money. Right. And I always think that overall, like it's about solving a real problem for a target customer. And if some sort of technology falls into a way that you can actually enable yourself or your customer to do that thing better or solve that problem, use it. But chasing after and repositioning your business to be and fit within the landscape of venture, I have almost never really seen it work, especially from an underrepresented founder and business owner perspective, where venture is less likely to be granted your way. But I know it's the hot trigger word is just like, build something that solves a real problem. And if it has the opportunity to better enable you to do that thing, use it. And if it doesn't, don't chase, right? Because in reality, what you'll be left with is you ended up spending all your time adjusting the pitch versus building the business. And I think what's happening right now with venture is that it's forcing more businesses like ours to figure out how to build really, really, really good businesses, right? And by the way, by doing so, that actually gives you more leverage in the venture conversation because VCs love one thing more than anything is telling them no. That will make you more likely for them to say yes. But as a whole, I think I'm intrigued to see what happens within the broader venture community over the next couple of years, because as businesses are forced to become more profitable, venture will likely start to become closer to small to medium-sized private equity. And as these businesses become profitable, debt becomes a more viable option to grow their business, which I think really is what we're seeing. And that's the trend line going forward. But I want to sort of double click into one sort of segment that is a really big one that we're focused on here at Bags, which is CPG. A good portion of our customers are within this space. That's one where we've seen a real crunch from a venture perspective. The days that venture was going, the days where venture would fund inventory to fill a large purchase order, from what we've seen, are likely over, right? So, Will, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to get you to kind of. I know we talk all the time about this concept of a debt stack, right? What is a debt stack? One, how do we think about a debt stack from the lens of CPG? Two, and then three, and I know you touched on this a little bit already, but like if you have some equity dollars within CPG, what should you be using that money for? Right. So I know that was three. Debt stack, like breakdown of debt stack within CPG, and then like what should a CPG business be using venture money for if they get access to it?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think one thing that people get to a lot of times when running a business is this idea that they need to get money in, and they need an amount of money that's based on potential rather than actual financial data. And it makes sense, right? A business that is doing $1 million in revenue might be right on the doorstep of. I actually know I have a business that I know very well who's had about $150,000 in annual revenue, and it's very likely will do $11 million by the end of the year through one contract. Well, how does a business that can only justify, like $30,000 perhaps in debt financing manage to finance growth that quickly? And that's where the debt stack comes in. I think the purpose of a debt stack is to allow for different lenders to support different elements of a business's operations so that things can get done. It allows someone to specialize in a specific thing from the lending standpoint so that they know how to do it really well. And then allows the business to get multiple things done. And so a way to think about it is a business that has seasonal fluctuations might want to have a term loan or a line of credit at all times and not really spend all the money. Just keep cash on hand as a contingency. And yes, you're paying interest on it. You're spending some of it on revenue generating activities, but you're trying to keep some healthy cash flow with that money. But then as a business, especially a business that's expanding into retail or wholesale operations, starts to get purchase orders, you might need some purchase order financing. And the reason purchase order financing is great is because it's based on the credit of the wholesaler, which is great if you're selling to Walmart. It's less great if you're selling to like a Saks Fifth Avenue that's borderline bankrupt all the time. Because that retailer's credit, I can say that because it's true. Because the retailer's credit is under scrutiny, not yours, it's easier to unlock some funding. The problem is that typically a retailer wants the product within 2 weeks, and most production cycles are longer than that. So you might need to add inventory financing ahead of that, which is based on your credit. So you're going to get a more expensive dollar that you can refinance with the PO financing when it comes up. And this is a very simplified version. We have an article about this available on our website if you want to really dig into it. And then you might want to add some accounts receivable financing. So that's the debt stack. You're using, in some cases, 3 or 4 lenders to create a ton of efficiency so you don't spend a single dollar out of your bank account to expand your retail operations. And if you're savvy, you can combine your e-com and retail operations to make sure that both of them are financed in this way. Really brilliant.
Just to throw a plug in there, if you don't know how to build that, like that's what we do. We can help you figure out how to build that stack.
I'll do it for you.
Plugged.
In terms of what equity should be spent on, I think the highest leverage use of equity financing is investments in growth that are a little bit riskier. You want to take a slight marketing gamble. You want to burn a little bit of money for a period of time to test things and see what's going to work really well for you. That's a place that equity dollars can work. If you're a consumer product business, like definitely don't use it to buy inventory. That's a really great category where debt can operate. And then also to ensure the success of campaigns. So if you are selling into Target for the first time and you're going into 400 Target locations, you want to make sure your velocity is really great. So if you lose money on the first purchase order, it's not ideal, but it won't be the end of the world if it means that your results were good enough that you get a larger order the next time. When you're getting a PO from a retailer, you don't want to be thinking about how much money you make on that first PO. You want to be thinking about the 10th PO. And in order to succeed, you really need to invest in marketing around that. You need to convince people. You need to think like you're renting shelf space at the Target, and you need to convince people to go there and shop. So investing in marketing around retail activations, marketing experiments, and other growth experiments that you're not 100% sure are going to work are good uses of equity funding. Those are all things that are optional for a business, right? A growing business can actually just do the things that are working, make enough money to make those investments directly. So if you're struggling to attract equity investment, don't think that those things are off the table, but maybe start off regional with a retailer instead of going national from day one. Maybe go even local. Prove yourself in a smaller category so that you have the ability to grow over time, and be a little bit more patient, because you don't have all the money in the world to light on fire on the way to growth. And the businesses that have tried that have failed in most cases.
Yeah, yeah, and well, I actually, while you got the mic, would you mind just giving us like one example of a business who, thought they were going to raise equity, right? Transitioned into using debt and building a debt stack, and was able to see some business growth?
Yeah, I mean, I have 100 stories of this. I think one really interesting case for us is a client of ours that's in the snack business, and has a bunch of retail relationships, from the traditional grocers to some of the bigger names that you might recognize, and came to us in the process of trying to raise money, was struggling to attract equity investment, had a ton of demand, new retailers that wanted to sign on, and had a sort of a debt schedule that didn't look great. And what we managed to do is work with this business, and we, in the initial phase, brought 4 lenders to the table, engaged all 4 of them, one to clean up some of the stuff in the existing debt schedule, one to supplement some of the inventory purchasing, another to supplement the purchase order financing, and finally, one to challenge an existing agreement for accounts receivable financing. So the founder came to us and had an AR partner. We were able to bring another one to the table. Ultimately, she stuck with her current partner, but got a better rate. Now, as a result of this, this client unlocked the cash she needed to launch into a brand new channel. Also got insights financially that she was losing money in one of her largest channels. So every purchase order she got from a certain retailer, she lost money fulfilling. So she was able to shut that channel down, double down her efforts into a new channel, and she had this debt stack. And when she redid her equity investment deck, she put the debt stack on a slide. And she said she went into her first equity pitch with that slide, and the investor stopped her on that slide, went through each number one by one, asked her to break down the cycle, and invested on the call. And that's the type of thing that we want to see. We want to see that financial efficiency leads to not only great outcomes for the business. She's grown 10x in one of those grocery categories. Her business is healthier. Her margins are healthier. There's more money coming in the door. That's great. She's also attracting more investment because people are able to identify through clear practices that she's savvy. She has a plan to scale deliberately in CPG, which is the place that most businesses fall apart, because there's plenty of examples of businesses that raised equity and grew and raised equity and grew and never cracked a profit. And then when the equity tap turned off, they were gone in a matter of days. And an investor who sees that that's not going to happen to a business is going to be far more likely to be excited.
I love that. I love that. And I also think you covered many of the misconceptions as it relates to debt, right? And in reality, and it's a part of what we spend a lot of time doing and what our platform does is it's really about understanding the implications of any financial product, right? On your revenue, on your cash flow, and on your business's growth, right? And when you can really have a clear picture for the financial product, what you're going to use that money for, and how that's going to help your business grow, then we can get to the point of being confident in being able to take that step forward, because that's really what it's all about. And some of the things that Ignacio and the team have built around debt schedule, understanding loan offers, being able to track those over time, comparing the implications of different financing products on your gross margins, like let alone like really giving you a clear picture of what your current gross margins are. Like those are the foundational elements of what we really hope to do. And this has been really awesome. But yeah, just to tie in a little bow and wrap up our time today on one of the first but many, I like CashPod. I'm going with that. First of many CashPods, from the boys at Bags. I think the first thing whenever you're thinking about debt versus equity, which has been the main theme of today, is like one, understand what type of business that you want to build, right? Start there, right? And by the way, if you don't want to build a venture-backed business, that's okay. The majority of the businesses in the US are not venture-backed. It doesn't mean you can't build a great business that generates a ton of wealth for yourself and has a ton of impact. So start there.
The super majority,
The super, super,
99.2%.
super 100%. The next phase to that is once you figure out what type of dollars that you need, like get your finances in order. You have to go there. We're going to be talking about financial management, financial efficiency in another conversation. So I won't dive into that today, but getting your finances in order, understanding what you need money for, really understanding what growth looks like, and then finding the right dollar for the right use case. Right. And that's a lot of what we do here at Bags is help you figure that out, navigate that, build that debt stack if building a debt stack is right for you, and then ensuring that you manage that debt and put it to work in the right way so that you can confidently grow your business. Because at the end of the day, like at Bags, like we want to see businesses grow. That's why we got into this game. This is why all of us are spending our time and our waking days, and our entire team are doing this work. So with that, I'm going to say peace for now. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening in, and look forward to you tuning in for the next one.
Until next time.